There are nights that feel so perfect, you almost want to stop time. You want to hold the moment in your hands and never let it go. That is exactly how Daniel felt on the evening of March 14th. It was a Tuesday, a completely ordinary Tuesday. The kind of night that most people forget by morning. But Daniel would never forget it. Not because something beautiful happened, but because it was the last beautiful night he would ever have. Daniel was 36 years old. He worked as a construction site supervisor in a mid-sized town in Ohio. He was not a rich man, but he was a happy one. He had a steady job, a modest house on a quiet street, and a family that made every hard day worth living through. His wife, Maria, was 34. She had dark brown hair that she always kept in a loose braid, and a laugh that could fill an entire room without even trying. They had been married for 9 years. And even after 9 years, Daniel still felt lucky every single time she smiled at him. Their son, Ethan, was 7 years old. He had his father's eyes and his mother's energy. He was the kind of child who asked 100 questions a day and genuinely wanted to know every single answer. Their daughter, Sophie, was 4. She was small and quiet and sweet, always carrying a stuffed elephant she had named Bubbles everywhere she went. Daniel used to joke that Bubbles had eaten more family dinners than most actual family members. Maria would roll her eyes, and Ethan would laugh too hard, and Sophie would hug Bubbles a little tighter. That was their family, loud and warm and perfectly imperfect. That Tuesday evening, Maria had cooked a simple dinner. Pasta with tomato sauce and garlic bread. Nothing fancy. But the kitchen smelled incredible, and the table was full of noise and laughter. Ethan was telling some long, complicated story about his friend at school who had tried to jump over a puddle and landed directly in the middle of it. He was acting it out with his hands, nearly knocking over his juice glass twice. Daniel caught it both times without even looking, the way parents develop a kind of invisible reflex for these things. Maria watched Daniel from across the table and smiled quietly to herself. Sophie had pasta sauce on her cheek and did not seem to care at all. She was feeding small pieces of garlic bread to Bubbles underneath the table, completely convinced that a stuffed elephant required regular meals. Daniel leaned over and whispered to her that Bubbles looked very full tonight. Sophie giggled and whispered back that Bubbles had actually been very hungry. Daniel nodded seriously, as if this was important information he needed to file away. These were the small, silly, sacred moments that build a life. The moments that seem so minor when they are happening and feel so enormous when they are gone. After dinner, Daniel helped clear the table while Maria started the dishes. Ethan ran to the living room to watch his favorite cartoon. Sophie climbed onto the couch with Bubbles and was asleep within 10 minutes, the way small children collapse into sleep like it is the easiest thing in the world. Daniel dried the dishes while Maria washed them, and they talked quietly about nothing important. A neighbor's new car, a bill they needed to pay, whether they should take the kids to the park that weekend if the weather held. Simple, married conversation. The kind that sounds like nothing and means everything. By 8:30, the house had settled into that comfortable evening quiet. Ethan had been sent to brush his teeth and argue mildly about bedtime, which he did every single night as if it might finally work one day. Maria was folding laundry on the bed. Daniel sat on the couch with a cup of coffee, finally off his feet after a long day on the construction site. His shoulders ached. His boots were still sitting by the front door where he had kicked them off 4 hours ago. He was tired in that deep, honest way that comes from real physical work. He had planned to be in bed by 9:30. That was when his phone buzzed. It was a message from his friend, Ricky. They had known each other since high school. Ricky was the kind of man who lived loosely, who moved through life without much of a plan and somehow always seemed fine. He was funny and unreliable in equal measure, and Daniel had always had a soft spot for him despite the chaos Ricky seemed to naturally generate around himself. The message was casual, just a few words. "Hey man, out at Murphy's. Come have one drink. Haven't seen you in weeks." Daniel stared at the message for a moment. He was tired. He knew he was tired. His body was already leaning toward sleep, already halfway convinced the evening was over. He typed back quickly, "Long day. Probably not tonight. He put the phone down, picked up his coffee, took one sip. The phone buzzed again. Come on. One drink. 20 minutes. I need to tell you something. It's important. Daniel exhaled slowly. He looked toward the hallway where he could hear Maria moving around in the bedroom. He looked at his boots by the door. He should have stayed on that couch. He told himself it would be 20 minutes. He told himself he would have one drink, hear whatever Ricky needed to say, and be back before Maria even noticed he had gone. He told himself he was not that tired, that the drive was only 12 minutes, that the roads would be empty this late on a Tuesday. He told himself all the things that tired people tell themselves when they are about to make a decision they should not make. He pulled on his boots. He grabbed his keys from the hook by the door. He walked quietly down the hallway and pushed open the bedroom door just enough to see Maria sitting cross-legged on the bed, folding one of Sophie's small shirts. I'm going to run out and meet Ricky for a bit, he said quietly. One drink. I will be back soon. Maria looked up. She studied his face for a second the way she always did, reading him the way only a longtime partner can. You look tired, she said. Do you want to just stay in? Daniel smiled and shook his head. It is fine. 20 minutes. I will be back before you fall asleep. Maria nodded and looked back down at the laundry. Okay, drive safe. Those were the last words she ever said to him. Daniel backed out of the driveway slowly. The neighborhood was quiet and dark. The street lights threw soft orange circles on the pavement. A dog barked somewhere a few houses down and then went silent. The night air was cool and smelled faintly of rain that had fallen earlier in the day. He rolled his window down a little as he pulled onto the main road. The drive to Murphy's Bar took him through a stretch of older road on the edge of town, a two-lane road that curved gently between trees. He had driven it hundreds of times. He knew every bend in it. That familiarity, it turned out, was part of the problem. He had been driving for about 8 minutes when his phone lit up on the passenger seat. He did not pick it up, but he glanced at it. Just a glance. Just the half-second reflex of someone who has grown too used to the pull of a glowing screen. It was enough. On a road he thought he knew perfectly. On a curve he had taken 100 times. His hands drifted just slightly. His tires found the edge of the lane. He corrected, but he overcorrected. The way tired people do. The way the brain fires a signal a half-second too slow when it is running on empty. The car swung wide across the center line. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. There was a flash of headlights. Then a sound that Daniel would spend the rest of his life trying to describe and never being able to. It was not like the crashes in the movies. It was not dramatic and slow. It was sudden and total and wrong in a way that had no words. Metal and glass and the world tilting sideways. His airbag deployed and hit him like a wall. His head snapped back. And then there was silence. A ringing, horrible silence that pressed in on him from every direction. He was conscious. That was the first thing he registered. He was in pain, but he was conscious. His hands were shaking, and he did not know why. He tried to move and could not for a moment. The windshield was shattered. The hood of his car was folded like paper. He turned his head slowly, and through the broken glass he could see another vehicle on the road. It had been pushed sideways by the impact. It was a gray sedan, smaller than his truck. The front was completely destroyed. For one strange moment, he could not process what he was seeing. Then everything collapsed in on him at once. He began screaming. Not words, just sound. He tried to get out of the car and could not open the door. He hit it, pushed it, threw his body against it until it gave way. He fell out onto the road, and the asphalt tore his palms open. He did not feel it. He was already moving toward the gray car, already screaming for someone to answer him, already begging without knowing yet what he was begging for. He reached the driver's side window and looked inside, and what he saw broke something inside him that has never healed. He did not know then, not fully. The human mind has a way of refusing certain information when the body is in shock. But somewhere below the shock, somewhere in the part of him that already knew, there was a feeling like the floor of the world had simply dropped away. He stood on that dark road in the cold night air with his hands pressed against the broken glass, and he screamed until he heard sirens in the distance. And then he collapsed. Not from his injuries. From something else entirely. From a truth his body understood before his mind was willing to. He woke up in a hospital bed. There was a ceiling above him, white and flat and impossibly still. There were machines around him making quiet, steady sounds. His right arm was in a splint. There were stitches above his left eye that he could feel pulling at his skin. His chest ached with every breath. He lay there for a moment, just staring at the ceiling, trying to remember where he was and why, the way you do when you wake up somewhere unfamiliar. And then it came back. Not all at once. In pieces. The phone buzzing. The dark road. The headlights. The gray sedan. He tried to sit up too fast, and a nurse appeared immediately, placing a firm, gentle hand on his shoulder. She was middle-aged, with tired eyes and a calm voice. "Mr. Daniel," she said quietly, "you need to lie still. You have some injuries we need to monitor." Daniel looked at her. "My wife," he said. The word came out strange, like it belonged to a language he was only just learning. "I need to call my wife." The nurse did not answer right away. She adjusted something near the 4 line in his arm. She looked at the wall for just a moment too long. And in that moment, Daniel understood everything. "Where is she?" he whispered. The nurse looked back at him. Her eyes were wet. She did not speak. She did not have to. There are no words in the English language, or in any language, that adequately describe what Daniel felt in that moment. There is no sentence that can carry the weight of it. He lay in that hospital bed, and he made a sound that he did not recognize as coming from himself. A sound that was not crying and was not screaming. Something older than both. Something that came from the deepest, most unguarded part of him. The nurse stood there and let him make that sound. She did not try to quiet him. She just stood there, because sometimes that is the only honest thing you can do. Maria had decided to make a late run to the pharmacy after Daniel left. Sophie had woken up with a slight fever, and the children's medicine they had at home was nearly empty. She had bundled both children into the car quickly, not thinking twice, because the pharmacy was close and the roads were quiet and it would only take a few minutes. She had no reason in the world to think otherwise. She had driven that same route dozens of times. She knew those roads just as well as Daniel did. And she was driving home just a few minutes away when Daniel's truck crossed the center line. The impact killed Maria instantly. The doctors told Daniel this later, quietly, carefully, in the specific way medical professionals are trained to deliver unbearable news. They said she would not have felt anything. They said this as if it were a comfort, and Daniel tried to let it be one. Ethan sustained serious injuries to his left arm and collarbone and spent 11 days in the hospital. Sophie, still buckled tightly into her car seat in the back, was bruised but survived with no major physical injuries. The car seat saved her. That small, ordinary piece of equipment that Maria had always insisted on buckling and double-checking every single time. Even in the end, Maria had been protecting her children. Daniel was released from the hospital after 6 days. His physical injuries were real, but not severe. A cracked rib, a fractured wrist, cuts and bruising across his face and chest. The doctors monitored him carefully, but his body healed the way bodies do. It was everything else that did not heal so easily. He walked out of that hospital and into a life he barely recognized. His sister had been staying at the house with the children. When he walked through the front door, Sophie ran to him and hugged his legs and said, "Daddy," in a voice so small and trusting that he had to grip the door frame to stay standing. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Daniel had ever experienced or could have ever imagined experiencing. There were arrangements to be made, and he made them in a fog so thick he could barely see through it. There were people at his door every day, neighbors and family and co-workers, bringing food and saying things that were genuinely kind and that he could not absorb. There was paperwork and phone calls and the specific cruelty of administrative tasks that continue regardless of how shattered you are. And there were his children, who needed him to keep going when every part of him wanted to stop. Maria's funeral was held on a gray Saturday morning. The church was full. Daniel sat in the front pew with Ethan on one side and Sophie on the other. Sophie still holding Bubbles, dressed in a small dark dress that someone had bought because Daniel had not been able to think that far ahead. He stared at the photo of Maria on the altar. It was from their vacation 2 summers ago. She was laughing at something off camera, her hair loose, her eyes bright. It was so completely and entirely her that Daniel had to look away. He could not look at it for more than a few seconds at a time. He did not cry at the funeral. He was beyond crying by then. He sat in that pew with his children pressed against his sides, and he listened to people speak about his wife, and he felt as though he was listening from somewhere very far away, as though he had left his body somewhere on that dark road and had not quite found his way back into it. He went through every motion that was required of him. He shook hands and accepted hugs and thanked people for coming. He did all of it, but he was not fully there. A part of him was still on that road, still looking through that broken window, still not understanding what he was seeing. The legal process came next. Daniel was charged with vehicular manslaughter. It was not a charge anyone fought hard against, including Daniel himself. He had crossed the center line. He had been tired. He had glanced at his phone. He had made a choice to get into that car when he should have stayed home, and that choice had taken a life. The life of his wife. The life of the woman who had told him to drive safe as the last words she ever spoke to him. He pleaded guilty. The judge sentenced him to 3 years of probation, mandatory counseling, and permanent revocation of his driving license. He was not sent to prison. Some people thought he should have been. Daniel was one of them. He found a grief counselor named Dr. Anwari, a quiet and patient man who had worked with trauma survivors for over 20 years. Daniel went to see him every week. He sat in a small office with a plant on the windowsill, and he talked because Dr. Anwari gently insisted on it. He talked about Maria. He talked about the night. He talked about the phone buzzing on the seat and the way he had glanced down at it and the half second that followed. He talked about the guilt, which was not a simple or clean emotion, but a vast and complicated one with many different rooms inside it. And he spent a long time walking through each of those rooms. He thought about all the moments that could have been different. If he had simply not gone. If he had gone but taken a different road. If he had left his phone at home. If Maria had decided not to go to the pharmacy. If Sophie had not had a fever. If the medicine cabinet had been fully stocked. He chased these threads endlessly at first, the way grieving people do, constructing and dismantling alternate versions of that night in his mind. Dr. Anwari let him do this for a while, and then one day said something that Daniel wrote down and kept. You cannot undo the night, but you are still here, and your children still need a father. The question is not what you could have changed then. The question is what you will choose now. It took a long time for that to mean anything. Grief does not follow a straight line or a tidy schedule. There were days when Daniel got out of bed and made breakfast and walked Ethan to school and read Sophie a story at night and functioned, more or less, like a person. And there were days when he sat on the kitchen floor with his back against the cabinet and could not move for an hour. Both kinds of days kept coming for a long time, mixed together without warning. He learned to let them come. He learned to stop fighting the bad ones quite so hard. His sister moved in to help with the children for the first year. He was grateful in a way he could not fully express. She cooked and cleaned and drove the kids to school and activities, all the things that required a car, all the things that Daniel now could not do. He felt his helplessness like a physical weight. He had been a man who built things, who managed people, who moved through the world with a sense of purpose and capability. Now he could not even drive his own daughter to her first day of kindergarten. He stood on the front step and watched his sister's car pull away and felt the smallness of that moment in a way that had nothing to do with pride. Slowly, over months and then years, things changed. Not back to what they were. They would never go back to what they were, but forward into something new that he was learning to live inside. Ethan healed physically and went through his own form of grief, quiet and complicated and processed in the way that 7-year-old boys process things, which is not always with words. Daniel learned to follow Ethan's lead, to sit with him in his quietness, to be present without forcing conversation. Sophie grew up not fully understanding what had happened, and then gradually understanding more, and Daniel answered her questions as honestly as he could for her age and her heart. He found work that he could do without a license. A small construction company offered him a desk-based project management role, thanks to a former coworker who vouched for him. He was grateful for it. He poured himself into it, not because it made him happy, but because being useful gave him somewhere to put himself on the days when there was nowhere else to go. He called Dr. Anwari every week without fail for nearly 2 years, and then every other week, and then once a month. The grief did not disappear, but it changed shape. It became something he could carry rather than something that buried him. There was an evening, about 18 months after the accident, when Daniel was sitting in the living room after the children had gone to bed. He was holding a photograph. It was from that last dinner, actually. His sister had found it on Maria's phone and printed it for him. In it, Ethan is mid-laugh, head thrown back. Sophie has pasta sauce on her cheek and is looking directly at the camera with wide, serious eyes. Maria is reaching across the table to wipe Sophie's face, but she is looking at Daniel, and she is smiling. And Daniel, at the edge of the frame, is looking back at her. He sat with that photograph for a long time. He did not feel only pain when he looked at it. He felt something else alongside the pain. Something that was not exactly peace, but was related to it. He had been there for that moment. He had lived inside it fully. He had been a good husband and a good father right up until the moment he made one devastating choice. And that choice did not erase everything that came before it, though it had cost him the person he loved most in the world. He held that photograph, and he thought about the people who were still here, who were sleeping down the hall, who needed him to still be their father. He started writing things down, not for anyone else at first, just for himself. Notes about Maria, things she had said, the way she folded laundry, the laugh that filled a room, the way she double-checked the car seat every single time. He filled 3 notebooks over the course of a year. And then, because Dr. Anwari suggested it, and because something in him needed it to mean something, he began sharing his story. In small ways at first. A local community meeting about road safety. A conversation with a teenager in his neighborhood who had just gotten his license. He did not want sympathy. He did not want absolution. He wanted one person, just one, to put down their phone while driving, to pull over if they were tired, to stay home when they should stay home. He wanted one person to make a different choice than he made. Because here is what Daniel knows now, sitting in that quiet house, holding that photograph. Tiredness is real. The pull of a glowing screen is real. The feeling that you are fine, that the road is familiar, that it will only take a minute, that nothing will happen on this particular drive on this particular night, because nothing has ever happened before, and why would it happen now? That feeling is real. And it is a lie. It is the most dangerous lie most of us will ever believe. Because the road does not care how familiar it is to you. The night does not care that you are almost home. The 1 second you look away does not care that you have never looked away before. 1 second. That is all it was. 1 second between a normal night and a life that cannot be put back together. 1 second between Maria reaching across the dinner table and Maria never coming home. 1 second that Daniel would give everything he has ever had or ever will have to undo. He cannot undo it. He has to live inside that fact every single morning when he wakes up, every night when he checks on his sleeping children, every time Sophie asks a question about her mother that he has to find the words to answer, every time Ethan gets quiet in the way that means he is missing her and does not know how to say so. So if you are watching this and you are tired, please stop. Pull over. Call someone. Wait. If your phone is lighting up on the seat beside you, let it light up. It will still be there when you park. If a friend is asking you to come out for just one drink when you know you are exhausted, it is allowed to say no. It is allowed to stay on your couch with your coffee and your quiet house and your ordinary Tuesday evening. Those ordinary evenings are not nothing. They are everything. Daniel knows that now. He knew it before, but he did not know it the way he knows it now, the way that is carved into every part of him. The people in your home, the ones who said good night to you, The ones who said drive safe without looking up from the laundry because they trusted you to come back. They are worth more than any drive, any errand, any message, any drink. They are worth more than the 20 minutes you were trying to save. Go home. Stay home. Be tired on your couch instead of tired on the road. Because 1 second is all it takes. And 1 second is all you will have left to wish you could change. Daniel still sits with that photograph sometimes. He always will. And every time he looks at it, he makes a quiet, private promise to Maria, and to Ethan, and to Sophie, and to himself, that the story she never got to finish will not be wasted. That someone somewhere will hear what happened on that ordinary Tuesday night and will make one different choice. Just one. That is all he is asking for. That is all any of this has ever been for. Drive safe. Please.